Hey, there's Jim from TrekWorld, and today we're going to take a very special mystery that we haven't really been able to solve for the past 50 years and answer it. That mystery, by the way, is probably best expressed with a question. Who stole the Enterprise?
Okay, I want a word of caution as we begin this video. I can tell you that some of the things that you're about to hear in this video are going to ruffle the feathers of some people, and that's perfectly understandable. I just want folks to remember that the things that I say in this video are backed by evidence that I'm going to show you, okay? I'm going to be quoting letters from Gene Roddenberry that we've all seen. I'm going to be quoting information that was in the recent lawsuit between the buyers of the auction unit and Heritage Auctions, and I'm going to be using quotes from folks that are directly involved in the 1970s until now. And some of those names are going to surprise you. Now, right up front, I want to be very direct. The ownership of the model has been validated all back to the 1970s. I know who put it in the unit, and I know the families that were involved, and all of that information is part of the public record. Now, some of the things that these people are going to say is going to cast a doubt on other people. I just ask everybody to do two things. One, keep an open mind, and two, remember that everybody's human, okay? So none of us are infallible, none of us are evil, and none of us is entirely, truly good. I guarantee you that this video is going to be one of the most thought-provoking videos that you've heard on the subject of a Star Trek studio model ever, period. So let's get started, shall we?
Now, like most Gen 1 Star Trek fans, sometime in the 1970s, I began to hear rumors through local conventions, maybe even Starlog, things of that nature, newsletters, that the 3-foot model that Gene Roddenberry had of his Enterprise that he normally kept in his office was now missing. The story bounced around fandom for a while that somebody had borrowed it from Gene, and then Gene couldn't remember who it was. Now, it would only take a couple years before a letter began circulating, and it actually is a letter from Gene Roddenberry to Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was at the time the head of Paramount Pictures, in which he basically just lays it out. Because, I had the model, I loaned it out to somebody in the visual effects department for Star Trek the Motion Picture. But now, it hasn't been returned. I don't know exactly who it was I loaned it to. And the gentleman that actually picked it up and delivered it for me and then came back is also now saying he doesn't know who has it. Now, one of the things the Katzenberg letter says is that the request for the model actually came to Gene through John Popple. And then Gene gives the model to John, and John takes it to the person who made the request. The letter further goes on to say that, hey, after it was done, he asked John, who'd you take it to? John didn't remember. That's an interesting statement that he didn't remember. Maybe he really didn't. But there are a lot of people who left comments on a video that I did earlier where I recounted this. They said they just really found it to be extremely hard to believe that John wouldn't remember anything at all about who asked him for the model and who he delivered it to. However, the thought of him completely forgetting who made the request and he gave the model to, that just simply doesn't jive with folks. So it is there. It's just there, and that's just the way it is. Now, another thing we need to be very clear on, Gene said for years he gave that model to somebody at Paramount, that it actually was given to someone at Robert Abel Associates. And apparently he went back and asked Robert, but of course this was after they got fired, and he said, I don't have it. And that's what Gene recounted back to everybody. But I want to point out that Robert Abel was involved in the fabrication of the Phase 2 Enterprise. There's a very famous photo showing the model in a workshop being built up. Behind it on the counter is a Constitution-class starship from the original series, which for years and years people thought might have been the last known good footage of the 3-foot model. As a matter of fact, that's what I thought when I first saw that photograph. However, if you look at the photo really good, no, it's an AMT model, because the shape of the saucer's underside isn't flat the way that the 3-foot models was and is. However, they obviously needed at least the AMT model for reference. The very same people asked for the 11-foot model and a Klingon D7 from the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian said, well, you can have the Klingon D7 for a loan, but the 11-foot model stays here. It's a permanent display item. And then the Robert Abel people got the model, disassembled it into its components, specifically so that they could make new molds, so they could reproduce copies of it, of which I think they made 7. So Robert Abel definitely would like to have reference starships, and he needed one for the Constitution class. The photograph we have says he made do with the AMT, but then again, Gene says he gave it to somebody at Roberts. So by the time the early 80s rolled around, we were now having even more urban legends in the background. There was one story that actually hung on for years, and there's usually another variation of this in just about every other what happened to this item from Star Trek. But for whatever reason, the fans started saying, oh, when Rod Roddenberry, Gene and Angel's son, got older, he actually got hold of the model and somehow managed to actually get it in the pool and destroy it in the pool. No, this was the story that obviously Gene and Mate never confirmed, and Rod would say for years as an adult, that is not what happened. We don't know what happened to it. Now, Gene always called it missing, but after Gene passed, Majel started talking about it in the different conventions and in different magazines and stuff, and she was a lot more stringent. This isn't missing, it was stolen. This is considered stolen property. So it became common knowledge to Star Trek fans by, I'd say, Star Trek 4, the Voyage Home, that we were now dealing with a stolen item. And amazingly, over the years, it didn't show up at a private collector's museum, which is where I personally kind of thought it was, so it ended up in a private collector's hands. And it was basically just a real head scratcher. So little did I know that when I did this video 2 years ago, that I would end up being part of the narrative. But it all began for me with that video. I sat down one day and decided, you know what, I want to go ahead and I want to do a video on YouTube that actually tells the entire history of the model up to the point where it disappeared. Like a lot of subjects that TrekWorld dives into on YouTube, there's not a whole lot out there. There was no other video dedicated solely to the history of a missing model. So I wanted to make a one-stop shop in one video. So I laid the whole story out and pushed it on YouTube and didn't think anything of it at that point. So a little over a year goes by and I'm up editing late one night and I start getting contacted by you viewers. And the first one comes across, and I'll put a screenshot right up here so you can see who it was. If it weren't for people like him, I'd never have gotten involved in this to begin with. So I cannot overemphasize enough how important it is for you folks to give me information or to ask questions. We're in a unique circumstance that because of the way this channel works, it's far more interactive than the other Star Trek channels. So it's not like under normal circumstances, you could contact a content creator for Star Trek and ask them a question or give them information and have them make a video on that subject. This channel works exactly like that, whether it's been tracking down old friends that we haven't seen for years and helping each other to do that on our community page, or whether it is in recognizing work that someone has done that maybe didn't get as much recognition as possible, or whether it's just useful in collecting various minutiae that individually don't really say much, but collectively begin to paint a tale. So the topics of the communication that night was, Jim, you did a video about a year ago on this Enterprise model, and by the way, it just showed up on eBay. Now, of course, when that was first sent to me, I did not respond to it immediately. As difficult as it may be for some people to actually believe, I'm not always 100% online, but I am usually online 80 to 90% of the time. In this case, I was awake and I did get the notification. And a few minutes later, I picked it up and I looked at it and I went, oh. So I shoot out to eBay, gone. It's not there anymore. It's like, okay. So I make a video and I put it up on YouTube like the very next day. I say, hey guys, breaking information. It looks like that model might have shown up. And, I'll be doing another video very shortly to give you all the info. But what the purpose of this one for the most part is, I know that some of you have screenshots of that auction. And then lo and behold, the same person that had originally contacted me got back with me again via email and Facebook and said, here, and gave me like 7 or 8 photographs of the auction. And I made that video and I put that up for you. And that was November 1st, maybe, because it was Halloween night that the auction occurred. The rumors began flying almost immediately. There were people posting things all over the forums with information, but the problem was it was literally happening at the moment of discussion. So we would find out over a course of several days that things that were attributed to some people were never actually spoken. Data that had been given to us had mysteriously vanished and could no longer be verified. And probably most frustratingly enough, there was no way to begin building a cause and effect reaction based on that eBay ad. So fast forward a week or 2 weeks, and then Rod Roddenberry issues a statement that yes, he is in contact with the people who have bought the model, and they are working on a way to get it back home to him. That press statement had one of the major effects of quieting down the internet community, because literally right up until like 5 minutes before people read it, there were people on both sides of the camp. Rod knew nothing about it. Rod already had it. There were all sorts of things. And this has been the generic issue that we've had with this particular subject since the 1970s, going all the way up to May 7th of this year, in that people have been recounting the stories they've heard without actually having any real evidence behind them. And so it becomes hearsay. And if you all remember that little test that teachers used to do with us when you were in grammar school, where she'll whisper a message in one child's ear, and then each child in turn whispers it to the one on the other side of them, and sooner or later that message comes all the way around the room and back to the teacher. And guess what? It has nothing to do with the message she told the first student. So that's what happens in these circumstances. So at the end of the day, nobody really knew what was going on. And we ate silence for several months. Now, during that time frame, I remember posting several videos here. Finding this thing, in my opinion, was very much like getting the $1 million piece in Monopoly, or winning the Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot. 35 microseconds after you know you've done it, you need to call a lawyer. Okay? Always call a lawyer, because no matter whether you think you want to go to court or not, you're going to end up in court. So during that time, I actually did another series of videos where we took a forensic look at the evidence that was in front of us. The damage to the model, wood grains, all sorts of information that we had to match what we knew from the TV series modifications and from when it sat mounted on a gooseneck stand on Gene's desk. And we compared all those photos and overlaid, transparent, and all sorts of stuff. And it's like, you know what? This is probably the real thing. But no one had actually laid hands on it yet. And then the silence drifted into months. And I really expected we were to hear something like in January, but we didn't. But on April 15th, income tax data, a bombshell is dropped. Heritage releases a series of photographs along with a press release saying, hey, this is the lost model from Star Trek. Heritage found it, and existing as an intermediary between the buyers and Rod Roddenberry, they negotiated for its safe return and the payment of $600,000 in a finder's fee. This also was covered in a video where we actually take an in-depth look at all the photographs that were taken that day, as well as statements that were made. The authentication team was basically a panel of recognized Star Trek experts that were brought in, ironically, on April Fool's Day, April 1st, to the Heritage office in Los Angeles to review the model and to create the needed publicity that would go with its announcement. Do you have a message that you would like to share with us and the Star Trek universe? If so, please call our user comments line and give us your thoughts. So as of April 16th, when everybody reads it, we think the world is all good. Roddenberry's getting the model back. He's paying some type of finder's fee. And what could possibly go wrong in that scenario? We should have asked ourselves what could go right in that scenario. Because on May 7th, a lawsuit was filed in the Los Angeles court system by the buyers that bought it against Heritage. Now, the details of the lawsuit, and there's a video for that too, the details of the lawsuit go into that they are not saying that they have any beef whatsoever with Rod Roddenberry. In fact, in the lawsuit, it specifically points out that Roddenberry himself and Roddenberry Enterprises, Inc. had nothing to do with their dispute on the alleged actions of Heritage. Their problem was not with Rod Roddenberry. Their problem was with Heritage. If you have any videos, photos, or documents that you would like to donate to us, please feel free to send them to jim@trek-world.com or submit them via the web at submit.trek-world.com.
Now I want to talk a little bit about how this video has been vetted before it was released. Okay, the things that are going to be disclosed in it, I wanted to make absolutely certain that people who were there and had an inside seat on what happened in the 1970s had an opportunity to see this before I released it, because I desperately wanted their input. You've heard me say this time and time again, that it's not that we didn't know something, it's that we didn't ask the right questions. So sometimes you have to show something to somebody that's never been done before, knowing it might actually disquiet them and get a response. And that's what I did. Their responses are reflected in this video and with the editorial comments that I'm telling you right now. Now, as mentioned by Gene in the Katzenberg letter, somebody asked John Povell for the model. John went to Gene. Gene approved, gave it to John. John delivered it. And then it disappeared, according to that letter. Now, before we go anywhere else, I will tell you that Absolutely no one has ever indicated that maybe John Povil wasn't up and up about this. There's no indication of that at all. There are some questions, how did you forget, okay? Comments that I got back from Susan Sackett about this, she definitely said John wasn't involved in anything whatsoever. And she also confirmed for me something that we've all heard, but wasn't in the Katzenberg letter. And that was, Gene didn't just give it to Paramount. Gene actually did have it delivered directly to the physical location of Robert Abel and Associates. We've all heard that, but this is the first time I've gotten a quote that I could present to somebody if they doubted me and show that, okay, somebody who was there, it went to Robert Abel. And that actually makes some of the arguments that I'm going to be making later on in this video about where it went from there actually a lot more clear than they were before her comments. I'm pretty sure I was going in the right direction to begin with, and I'm pretty sure that after you hear this whole video, you're gonna find out there's no other way to draw these kind of conclusions. Now, that being said, email me, write me, post, do everything. We are only as good as our weakest link, and our weakest link is communication. So if you know something that can demonstrate anything in this video was 100% absolutely not the case, I need to see it, and I'll put it out instantly. But I'm going to be leaving you a trail of breadcrumbs in the meantime, and some people aren't going to like where they're going to go. Finally, I want to thank Susan Sackett for taking time not only to view the video, but to give me her concerns about multiple places through it. Her concerns are well met and well taken. They unfortunately don't change very much about what's in this video, so buckle up and get ready for the ride of your life on this channel.
These gentlemen went into an auction house who had the reputation of being the place to take a prop or some kind of celebrity item in for auction. Just a few months prior, this exact same auction house sold off Greg Gene's collection after he passed for like $13.7 million. So let me be very clear about this. Some people feel very negative to heritage auctioneers, and some people feel very positive to heritage auctioneers. I think that everybody shifts those sides every now and then, depending on the topic at hand. But the business transaction that was agreed to on November 2nd was a signed document between Dustin and his partner and Heritage Auctions to auction the Enterprise in a July 2024 auction. For insurance purposes, the model was immediately appraised to $800,000. All of this information that I've given you so far are in the public court records. And guess what? There's a video for that too. We went through the entire 46-page document and we covered everything on a live stream with you guys. So the lawsuit maintains that, hey, Heritage not only broke trust with Dustin and his partner, but they had actually unilaterally, by themselves, determined that Dustin and his partner did not have legal ownership of the item, and that the legal ownership belonged to Roddenberry Enterprises. And they did that based off of, guess what? Those urban legends I was telling you about. The model's stolen property, it belongs to Roddenberry. They even admit this is their logical reason for working with Roddenberry when they filed their answers back with the court on a 7-page document that there's also a video on. When I went over it, not long after that video was done, I'm contacted by the lawyer representing Dustin, and we begin a series of conversation recounting the things that occurred between the eBay auction and the lawsuit from their point of view. So those of you who follow the channel should not be surprised that I'm talking to Dustin. But after hearing a sequence of events by Dustin and the lawyer on what happened, a very unexpected communication came my way. Now right here, everything I'm telling you from this point on has nothing to do with Dustin, has nothing to do with that lawyer. It has to do with people that have contacted me as a result of watching the videos that have come forth with information they shouldn't have. This is Rosa Jennings. Now Rosa contacted me a couple of times, and I've got some of the screenshot, and there were things that she told me that I know are true, but the only person who would know is the person or the family that put the model in storage. She is the daughter of the man who had the model. It was in one of 2 storage units, so of course, she's already saying, we're going to sue. The other thing she said in the comments were far more perplexing to me. Namely, the model wasn't stolen. Gene Roddenberry sold the model to her father for $5,000. Okay, so I have a Jennings daughter who says that Gene sold the model to her dad. She also confirmed that she knew that the model was in the unit The unit had been rented for years by her father, and he had gotten that model from Gene Roddenberry for $5,000. The fact that the unit was rented by her father and that she was the one dealing with the storage unit, no one knew that. No one else had been told about the father-daughter thing and that the unit was in her father's name and that she was very upset because she said they shouldn't have sold it. That was all information that happened behind the scenes that was not made public. And everything I just told you is pretty much revealed by her in her public statements. I'm just telling you, I know that's exactly what happened behind the scenes. Okay? So if her father paid $5,000 for it, what does that tell us immediately about the Jeffrey Katzenberg letter? I don't know if you actually saw the little light bulb going off over my head, but that means the Katzenberg letter is not telling us the truth. The letter is very explicit, and when you look at what it says, I'm beginning to see a very good possibility of why the letter was really written. One, it clearly says in the beginning of the letter, I loaned to someone at Paramount, and now I don't remember who it was. We don't know who has it. It's missing, and I want it back. So no matter if the letter is telling the truth or not, it does achieve one goal immediately. It automatically made everybody think the model is truly lost. But whether the statement's in the letter are true or false, the effect is the same way. And that is now everybody universally believes the model's missing. They'll look for it, and it conveniently illustrates why Gene doesn't have the model anymore. Because the disappearance of something this big and valuable, it gets noticed. And it got noticed. Gene didn't fill out a police report. Numerous people have talked to the Los Angeles Police Department in the past, and there's no record of a police report ever being held. And aside from a couple side conversations that Gene had between the letter and the day he died, Gene really didn't harp on it too much either. We heard more about it being stolen after he died, and Majel started recounting to the press that this is stolen property. It's not lost. Somebody didn't borrow it. It was stolen. That's where 99% of us became convinced it was a stolen model. So where does that leave us? Where it leaves us right now is the chain of ownership working backwards. Dustin and Jason buy it on October 27th. Not too long after that, it's determined it's been in that storage locker since 1986. Yes, you heard that right. 1986. Almost 40 years. That model has been locked up in that storage unit because that is when Rosa's father put it there. So that means we can trace the custody of ownership back to 1986, and now all I have to do is figure out how to get into Rosa's father's hands to be put into that storage unit in 1986, and why did her father and everybody else that were peripherally aware of her claim that her father paid for it, why didn't they speak up and let everybody know that it hadn't actually been stolen? They bought it. Here is where things get interesting. You see, Rosa's maiden name is Jennings. If you look at the casting crew credits for Star Trek The Motion Picture, you will find 3 gentlemen who worked on Star Trek The Motion Picture whose last names were Jennings. They had 3 different roles. 2 of them were in production, one significantly, and one of them was an actor. Now, timing-wise, all 3 of these men are actually too old to be her father. So the implication is that the model was sold to the son of one of these gentlemen. So that's the way Rosa tells the story. But I think she was born after it was put in there. And so as a result, she's repeating what her father told her. So if I look at it that way, she's not the daughter of one of those 3, but she's the daughter of one of their kids. So of the 3 Jennings that worked in Star Trek The Motion Picture, I can pretty much assume that one of the 3 of them would have to be her grandfather, because the amount of time that has passed between when they worked on the movie and her age today. Those 3 men were Junero Jennings, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name that way, but you would recognize him not only from Star Trek, but from the original Battlestar Galactica. He was an actor, and as an actor featured in Star Trek The Motion Picture, he certainly had access to Gene. So the next Jennings that I want to introduce you to is Mark Jennings. Mark worked in Paramount's sound department, and he's credited being with on Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. So that brings us down to our 3rd Jennings. Now, Joseph R. Jennings had a very specific role on Star Trek The Motion Picture. You see, Joseph R. Jennings was the art director, not only of Star Trek The Motion Picture, but Star Trek Phase 2. He's actually credited as one of the co-designers, along with Michael Miner, on the original Phase 2 USS Enterprise refit model. Where the whole Robert Abel thing really fits into the Jennings story, Jennings was hand-in-hand working with Robert Abel and was an active part of the design and fabrication team. And that perfectly matches what Gene said when he said, hey, I loaned it to Robert Abel because Paramount asked for it. We know for a fact that things like the Klingon D7 was disassembled so they could specifically make copies of it for Phase 2. So the exact same reason they took the D7 apart, it's why they would need the 3-foot model during design. Because remember, Paramount had asked the Smithsonian for the 11-foot model back. So there's Joseph working in the art department, designing an Enterprise for Phase 2. And aside from his name not being in that letter, it's a perfect match. So here we are. If you are a member of what I consider to be Gen Zero, these are the Gen 1 Star Trek fans that started in the Los Angeles area in the late 1960s, then you're familiar with the dynamics of this really well. Gene Roddenberry has sent out a letter to Paramount, and in that letter, he describes loaning the model to somebody on Star Trek The Motion Picture and never getting it back. And then, amazingly, he does not do a police report. Why do you think that is? Because there would have been an investigation that would have revealed if his family had that model, and they would say, we didn't steal it, we bought it. So after all these years, now we know why a police report was never found. Jennings then puts it in the lockup in 1986. It stays there pretty much forever. And all of this explains why everyone was quiet for the most part about this model until after Gene passed. Gene said that John didn't remember it. John hasn't come forward and told anybody they remembered. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be having this mystery right now. I do honestly believe Major probably was not even aware of the fact that it was sold. And while it is possible that Rosa Jennings is not telling the truth, the odds of her giving me a story that matches information that the public doesn't know, that's a 1,000,000,000 to 1 coincidence. That would also explain why they would not immediately try to contradict what Gene was saying about the model being loaned out and not returned. They could keep the model, they just need to be quiet about it. Don't talk about it in public. And that was an arrangement that worked for almost 40 years. So there you go. Chain of custody. In 1977, Joseph R. Jennings goes to work for Paramount on Star Trek Phase 2. Sometime between 1977 and 1979, the model is given out by Roddenberry to somebody at Paramount in the visual arts department, and now nobody can remember who that person was, and nobody knows where the model is. In 1986, the model is taken from wherever it was, and it's put in a storage unit by the Jennings family, where it was not forgotten about. The daughter knew it was there, and she's very upset about it, which means that Rosa and her family were completely aware of the fact that it was supposedly stolen. So after being placed in the locker in 1986, on October 27th, 2023, the locker is auctioned off and it's discovered by Dustin and Jason. And there you have it, a chain of physical custody. Now, as these lawsuits progress, you're going to actually see more and more information that I'll be able to actually bring out and show you to tie this entire audit trail into a single cohesive package. But as to not possibly interfere with the various lawsuits, I'm not going to be discussing things that I hear from Dustin and his party. Only things that I hear from outside parties that match the things that I've been told by Dustin and the inside parties. So some people out there right now listening to this video are still not going to believe what I just said, because there are people who always doubt. And everybody's entitled to their opinion, even if they're wrong. So the whole 3 Jennings thing sort of reminds me of the story in Mamma Mia, where the girl's trying to find her one father that could have been any one of 3 eligible men. So all 3 of them show back up, and the whole movie's about her figuring out which is which. A paternity show game, if you will. So there it is, 1977 to 2023, everywhere the model's been. What are your thoughts? I guarantee multiple people watching this now have more information than what I've just told you, because that model did not hide for 40 years. Professional folks attached to Star Trek knew it was there.